What's up, kids? I apologise, I sound like an old fart, but I'm not much of a public speaker. I'm going to keep this brief, as William Shakespeare said, brevity is the soul of wit. This is, as it's been known up until now, Project Afterlife. I feel like Afterlife Reverie, that's the name I've settled on for now. It's not 100%, but I'm liking it enough where probably stick with it. Yeah, I'll roll with it. So what in the world is Afterlife Reverie? Afterlife Reverie is a puzzle platformer. It takes great inspiration from one game in particular, Kubonashi Recollection. It's an exceptional game. I honestly recommend everyone plays it just in the ball. Just play it, squeeze all the juice out of it. It is a fantastic museum. Of course, it also takes liberal inspiration from a few other sources. Portal 2, that's a fairly prominent one. It's got an emphasis on puzzles and momentum and physics and that. Maybe not to the same crazy degree, but something a bit tighter about this one. This one's a bit more oriented towards score chasing, time chasing, all sorts of stuff. Portal 2 is a very structured, story-driven kind of game, and that's not to its detriment whatsoever. But I have been a bit, compared to that game, I'm a bit more focused on the replayability, time chasing aspects. And last but not least, to fit the old motif of free that goes around these days a lot, another big cornerstone point of inspiration for this was, not a game bizarrely enough. It's a old anime now. What was it, 2012? Well, if you're 2012, I guess you're old, kid. But yeah, I think 2012 anime called Dusk Maid of Amnesia. It's very few things I've ever seen like it. It kind of struck a strong chord with me, but how does it affect this game? Well, it's a story about a ghost, and there's a romantic aspect to it. It's not one-to-one a complete parallel to Dusk Maiden of Amnesia, but it has those similar elements. It plays off of those similar narrative elements, so I feel like it's worth including as one of those cornerstone inspirations. So when you first load into the game, you enter Izanami's domain. This is the hub world of the game, for lack of a better word. It's where you return to after you complete each world, and there's supposed to be dialogue with Izanami herself, but she's not implemented yet. The dialogue isn't implemented yet. This is, so far, my focus has just been making the game play well, settling on which mechanics I'm going to include, and obviously some basic graphics here. Speaking of graphics, you can obviously tell it's not my strongest suit. I've dabbled over the years in a sprite creator. I think I tried Paint Tools Sai, I think it was called. I'm not 100% on that, but no, over the years I've been tackling, drawing and all sorts of stuff from various different angles. Never been a master of any of it, but I feel like I've reached a certain degree of competence where the colour theory works. I feel that's the most important part of anything really. Colour theory, readability. Currently it's in a serviceable place. Their function is there. Just as important as graphic design is the sound design. Obviously, every single input the player makes, you want to have a satisfying feedback, you want a satisfying visual return, and you want a satisfying sound to go with it. So every time Yomi jumps, she does a little boop, 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 boop. It's just feels good to move around, and I feel that's the fundamental thing you want on any platform. 2D, 3D. It's why people still play, Mario 64 30 years later. So let's get into the first level. As soon as you load into it, you'll see that, Yomi's jump, it reaches exactly one block high, and so that sets a decent baseline in your head. You immediately understand, okay, if I see this wall, I know I'll be able to jump up it. If I know it's too high, I won't be able to jump up to it. If there's a 1 block gap, I can jump over it. If there's a 2 block gap, I more than likely will not be able to. So the first level, barren of all the other cornerstone mechanics, it teaches you how to jump, basically, which, for some journalists that might be a bit of a hurdle, but hey, I expect that you actually play video games. As you play the game, you'll notice there are these little squares littered around there, scraps. I'm not quite sure in their current form to communicate that perfectly, but I'm leaving them as is. How they work in the game is more important. Currently, I can always touch the graphics up later. But that first scrap is designed so that when you finish the first level, you'll see it in the corner of your eye and you think, Okay, what is that? Currently I'm not sure it stands out quite enough to get that, but like I said, that can wait for later. So that's the first bit of incentive to go back into levels, pick these things up, and just, you know, get more out of the game. The scraps do have a function, but just nothing implemented yet. Obviously, that's going to come further down the line. Now that we've finished the level a second time, let's discuss the ranks. The ranks are designed to, you know, be very tight. They're designed to get you to play the level in a very efficient manner. You know, it's like, obviously there's some levels where you can exploit your way around and get them really easy, but the point of the ranks is how efficient are you at beating the level in the intended manner. And, you know, obviously some of them are going to be very tough. The first level, the S rank, is deceptively difficult. You have to have a pretty good grasp on how the jumping arc and momentum works and all that. But it's, you know, it's doable when you've been playing the game a while. So even early on as the first level, I'm teaching you, you're not going to be perfect as soon as you pick up the game. If you want to master the game, sometimes you'll just have to leave it be, come back later. The second level is designed to teach you about level interactables and obviously, you know, what they do, but it's also there to teach you about the power gate. The power gate can be placed anywhere the player pleases at the cost of 1 power, and at any time you can press the same button to return to it, maintaining all the same momentum that you had before. Now, obviously that's not essential to beating this level. The lesson of this level is, you know, place your gate close to the actual gate, and then flip the switch, teleport, get in there fast. But you'll see the placement of the scrap is fairly conspicuous. It's quite strange. Conventionally, you're not gonna, probably not going to pick this up, but it is something that becomes fairly obvious later on. I'm gonna show it here anyway. It's place the gate in the air, jump and then teleport quickly. It might be the tiniest bit crawl to places in the game well before the player is explicitly told, you know, the gates conserve your momentum and that, but I feel like some players are going to pick up on that fairly early on. So it's a nice little early bonus for people who put 2 and 2 together and haven't watched this devlog, you little cheat. This level's fairly brief, so I'm going to discuss the parallax background a bit. Now, once again, art is not my forte, but I was quite impressed with how it's got implemented, but it wasn't without struggle. As you can see, the ghosts in the background, they move on a, I think it's a sine wave or a cos wave, I forget the specific term. I haven't done maths in many years, but sine or cos wave, they move up and down on a loop like the Medusa heads from Castlevania. And obviously you can see they all start in a random point in that loop, but when I first implemented this, it just didn't work. I just could not figure it out. But then about a month later I had a spark of inspiration where I realised, oh yeah, it's not working because I misplaced 1 letter. This is what game development is like. It's you know, the world is ending for want of a semicolon. For reference, here's the code in question. Rand F was written as Rand I, and I stands for integer, F stands for float. Integer rounds the whole numbers, and float against the decimals. So, when running with Rand I written, it would snap straight to 0 or 1, and those obviously produce the same position. So, once again, that's just game development in a nutshell, really. The fourth level introduces phasing. Whilst phasing, Yomi can, well, obviously phase through these green nets, I call them the ghost nets, and much like the power gate, it costs 1 of the use of the power resource. I had trouble coming up with a secondary mechanic to the gates. At first I was going for a sort of spirit bomb thing that would set off a chain of blocks, like one of the mechanics in Reverie, but I had too much trouble getting that implemented and I wasn't really sure if it fit the old vibe of the game or if I could get many interesting puzzles out of it, so I ended up scrapping it and going with this phasing instead, which, you know, probably a bit simpler, but it does leave some room for flexibility and skill in the puzzles later on, and it fits the ghostiness better than a bomb. The fifth level is a final test of sorts, though this is essentially still a tutorial, so it's not too tough. The main lesson here is, you know, you can still phase while you've got a gate placed, you know, unless you know the way to get to that scrap. I'm not going to reveal it here because it is another one of those where you're supposed to come back later when you understand the game better, and I feel like I'll be showing a bit too much on my own by just showing it here, but, you know, that is the intended lesson on the first time play. You know, put your gate here, then phase, get the key, then return. Of course, not every threat in the game can be just phased through. Well, I've got an explanation for it in my head, it's just a bit tedious. I'll have it as something Izanami can tell Yomi. But essentially, whilst phasing, Yomi can still be crushed by the gates. And later on, she can also still be pecked to death by the crows, but we'll see them in the next world. The general rule of thumb is, if it's glowing green like that, you can phase through it. So once the 5th level is beat and you're intended to be returned to the hub, have a little, reminiscence on Yomi's prior life and talk to Izanami a bit, and obviously that hasn't been implemented yet, so we just have to take a nice little stroll to World 2. But in the meantime, let's talk about the background. I meant to discuss this earlier. So there's red strings all around the background there, move on parallax layers, and I'm very pleased with how they've turned out graphically. It's I know it's worked better in execution than it looked in Creator. But yeah, those red strings, they do have story relevance if you know kind of the lore behind those. They symbolise, two people destined to be together. And so you look at all these in the background, you're in the underworld, bunch of those in the background all frayed, broken, you can see. It's kind of building up to where the story is heading, but it's been a bit, not too overt about it. It's probably something you'll just, pick up on later. And then we're on to World 2, where this is the first one where you can see I've obviously put some real efforts into the parallax backgrounds. It looks quite nice. Obviously, my main interest is in the colour theory, keeping everything readable, making sure everything doesn't detract from the foreground. The game is perfectly readable. But yeah, the parallax background is a bit more stripped back from its original incarnation. Originally there were a lot more trees in the background, but I just wasn't liking how they were turning out. Obviously none of the assets right now are final, but that was definitely a case where I'll show it up on the screen, but that was definitely a case where I felt, okay, I need to tone this down a bit. It works better, just simpler. That being said, Krita and Ace Sprite's gradient functions are absolutely carrying this game's artistic direction, so, big shout out to those guys. These crow enemies have been the biggest pain in the arse of making this game so far. I'll show the video if I can still find it anywhere, but for the longest time, I think I've spent maybe a few days getting these little bastards to work, but for the longest time, they would detect Yomi. The crow enemies use raycast, so as soon as they detect Yomi, that's aha, gotta go attack her. But for a solid 2 days, they would just immediately snap to the bottom right of the screen relative to Yomi's position. Obviously, you'll see that in the video, and I just could not figure out for the life of me why. But at some point, after about 17 failed solutions, I just subtracted their target destination from their own position in something like that in the code, and it works perfectly, not as I'd intended, but it actually works better than I had intended, which I'll get into in the ninth level. Something you'll see with this little house I haven't made any actual assets for yet is that it's still testing your skills while still teaching you things. It's teaching you use the scarecrow. You can still use the scarecrow mid-chase, but then you've also still got to put your gate before it. It teaches you can still use your gate while you're in your scarecrow form. I haven't put in the game yet that you can break out of the form anytime you want by pressing the phase button, but I imagine if you can't jump, if you get in a situation where you can't jump over a block, a player's going to be smashing all those buttons, and then they'll figure it out on their own anyway. But it's something I should tutorialise. This level has been the most tumultuous to make so far. That little ghost net dungeon down there has seen a lot of tweaking and redesigning, because every time I made a little change to it, Yomi's phasing mechanic could break the segment in 100 different ways, and every time I tweak the level, it's just, oh, she can just skip it anyway. So this was what led me to create these platforms that are the blue platforms that are solid on the level load. Originally they would only show up when you press the switch, but this is what incited me, okay, I've got to make some that just show up when the level starts, and it's plugged up this part of the level neatly, and it's also just less work down the road for more interesting puzzles. Yeah, originally this level was the second level of World 2, but it did see a bit of a redesign, nothing drastic. That ghost net section was already set, but this segment here where you have to get the scarecrow and get past the crow, that was added after I'd created the new 2-2 and introduced the scarecrow mechanic. Realistically, each possession is likely going to be unique to each world they're introduced in outside of a few edge cases, so I didn't want to introduce Scarecrow one level and then have one whole level after it where it's completely unused, because then it would only be used in 2 levels after it's introduced. It creates a slight difficulty spike earlier than intended, but I also feel like I've squeezed more juice out of the mechanic, which pleases me at least. Don't know about the players, we'll have to test that. I stated earlier that the crow's final movement was unintended, and this is what I mean. So initially, when the crow detected you, it would just beeline for you, and you had no chance to run away. It would just kill you there and restart the level. But how I've, fuck my way into coding it right now, it's as the closer it gets to you, the slower it goes, and so you can outrun it. It'll just be on your heels. And it's led to this very interesting scenario here. This would not have been possible had it been coded as I intended. So, that's really what a lot of game development is. It's you fuck something up in the code, it actually works better. You just roll with it. Of course, another lesson of this level is to take your time in preserving things. You're not going to win this if you just grab every key up there. If you grab the purple key, you've essentially made the level unwinnable. But it gives you the chance after the bird has been shot to death to go back and kind of observe the puzzle a bit, because you can restart anytime. There's no penalty for restarting. You can always restart the level, blitz through it there. So it gives you the space to, watch the level and, premeditate a path through it. This last level is the most open. There's a few different ways I've found that you can clear it in, and it's leaning towards the more difficult ones, and the more input heavy ones actually end up with the faster times, unless you use a little exploit I know, but I'm not sharing that with you just yet. It's intended to take around 30 seconds ordinarily, but there are a few methods that can shave it close to 25. I'm not sure what I'm going to show in the video as I record this, but you'll see what I'm meaning here. I might go through it a few times. But yeah, you can get the keys from underground and then get the green key up top. It's just you then have to hop over the blocks quite carefully. And so I went over this a bit earlier. Rank times selected based on what I feel is tough but reasonable. It's once again, it's all about efficiency. It's I have an idea of how you clear this level, how fast and how efficiently, how closely can you follow that plan. You'll get an S rank, A rank, B rank, or if you take too long, a C rank, which no shame in that. Some people just want to beat the game, have it be over and done with, and that is perfectly fine. I feel like the game should serve those people quite well, but it should also incentivize 100% in the game, or just getting as far as you want. There's too many games just absolutely filled with meaningless content that say nothing about the player that's completed it. In my eyes, the mark of a well-made game is that the visible difference between a skilled and experienced player and a new one is stark and very apparent. And there's just a lot of games where the only real difference is how much time have you thrown into it. It's you've got bosses that you're just not going to beat this unless you've played 500 hours grinding for this stupid gun that can, I don't know, shoot 2 more bullets per second. I ain't down with that. I like to respect the player's time. So, if you do ultimately get the game when it's completed, if you want to just finish it, that's cool. If you want to do absolutely everything in the game, that is also very cool. But either way, I don't want anyone's time to feel wasted. And there we go, that's most of the existing content. I do have the first level of World 3 made, but it's very unfinished and I haven't actually implemented a way to reach it within the game itself yet. I can only play it in the editor. But as for what scraps actually do, well, they do serve a purpose. There's an extras room down here. It's not currently accessible, but the plan is, the more scraps you collect, the more little cosmetics you can put on Yomi. I'm thinking, like sunglasses or a blindfold or stuff like that. She can be your special. But once again, that's all still up in the air. I'm still going to settle on that. Really, my main concern is not falling into feature creep. I've been a hobbyist game developer for quite a few years now, mainly working with RPG Maker. The Godot transition is fairly recent, but historically that has always been a thorn in my side. Having a good idea then just stapling too much random shit onto it. I feel like this is going in a good direction. Either way, these extras should not take long to implement when I do actually have a full game to implement them into. There will also be a reward for collecting every scrap in the game, but I won't do the same for getting every single S rank in the game. That's just a bit sadistic. But the game does still track that if you want to go for that. The current projected release date is by the end of this year. That is of course subject to change depending on just how long the game takes to make. Really, things can go wrong all the time. You know, it might take longer than expected to do graphical work, but I am hoping to have it done by the end of this year. So my current path could go one of two ways. I could just buckle down on all the content shown here right now, polish it, get it to a mirror machine, and then have it ready to show in the Steam Next Fest, assuming I could get onto that. But even if I don't, just have a demo out, just have something to show for it yet. Or I could just carry on making all the levels and worry about all the polishing that later. I'm leaning towards the first one because actually making the levels and that doesn't take a terribly long time. And I am eager to show this game off. Like, I am incredibly proud of what's been made so far. Thank you for watching. Subscribe if you wish to keep up with the game's development. Any likes, comments, shares, they were greatly appreciated.